What if I told you he wasn't the greatest? That a country would fail to protect its greatest natural resource? That sometimes it is a matter of life and death? That no one can outrun the truth? What if I told you he's the only true Cubs fan? That you can heal all wounds with a fight song? That the man no one could stop tragically was? What if I told you running a marathon is easy? 30 stories, 30 filmmakers, 30 years.
What if I told you about money? Money drives baseball. Every hit, pitch, catch, and run costs money. Coaches cost money. Managers cost money. Players are paid millions of dollars every year. Baseball is built on money. With all this focus, it's easy to assume that the teams with more money are more successful. And historically, that's been true. However, one man, Billy Beane, led the Oakland A's to be one of the most successful teams of the early 2000s, despite having one of the lowest payrolls in Major League Baseball. This is how he did it.
Baseball was flawed. Teams were looking in the wrong places. There was too much money placed on sluggers. These guys would hit flashy home runs that were appealing to the eye, but in reality they were hurting their teams. It was so frustrating looking at these guys spending tons of money on players that weren't even all that good. Sure, they would hit home runs here and there, but in between they were piling up outs for their team. In reality, the best way to protect the players' offensive efficiency was their on-base percentage.
Before Billy Beane discovered the key to his team's future success, he was a star athlete in high school. He was a multi-talented athlete, playing football, basketball, and most importantly, baseball. He was an absolute athletic specimen. He had a perfect combination of size, speed, and strength. Baseball scouts loved him.
Before Billy Beane, all we looked for in prospects were the tools. These were the ability to run, throw, field, hit, and hit with power. We spoke our own language. We would say that prospects had wheels, hoses, or engines. To anyone who was listening in, they might have thought we were talking about cars. The tools were all we would look for. Billy Beane was special. He had all the tools, so everyone wanted him. He was the perfect baseball player. I wanted to go to college. Stanford offered me a dual football and baseball scholarship. I was excited. I had my whole life ahead of me. I still wanted to go pro, but I also wanted to experience college. Scouts kept calling, mailing, and visiting, telling me I should go pro right away instead of going to college. It got annoying. Eventually, the Mets picked me and offered me a $125,000 contract. As a kid, I couldn't believe my eyes. I signed it right away. After that, I vowed to never make a decision based on money for the rest of my life.
Billy Beane went from being a promising commit to Stanford to a cheaply paid minor leaguer for the Mets. Despite this, Billy Beane tried to prove himself. His physical attributes continued to impress his coaches and trainers. He struggled throughout his career with confidence, and when he was in the majors, Billy was awful. He retired early because he struggled.
Billy Beane. Man, what a guy. He's quite a character. I'll never forget when I heard that one of my players had quit the team and decided he wanted to be a scout. I mean, that's unheard of. I tried to talk to him, telling him that there were millions of people who would trade anything to be in the big leagues, but he wouldn't listen. What kind of guy does that? He said he would be a better scout, and who was I to argue? I gave him the job as a scout way back in 1990. He said he wanted to discover the future of baseball. I think he wanted to make sure that what happened to him wouldn't happen to anyone else, that no more teenagers were misdrafted like him.
Billy Beane embraced a new approach to baseball scouting called sabermetrics. He was inspired by Bill James's book that compiled statistical inefficiencies in baseball. He went through old stat books and compiled patterns. As the years went on, Bill James spurred a statistical revolution. His stats showed the problem with traditional baseball knowledge, including the undervalue of the walk. Billy Beane was the only one that knew the potential of sabermetrics. After the 1997 season, Billy Beane was given the position of general manager for the Oakland Athletics. As general manager, Billy Beane implemented drastic changes to the scouting process for the A's. Billy Beane used his position to gain more and more influence in the day-to-day operations of the A's, so he was essentially both the GM and the head coach. Billy Beane used new statistics like walk percentage, on-base percentage to find the most valuable prospects that the other teams would overlook.
I'll never forget it. In the lead up to the 2002 draft, I thought I would be a nobody. I was prepared to spend the next few years in the minor leagues and then drop out and become a salesman or something like that. I was either too fat or too hairy for the major league teams. I was sitting in my parents' living room when I got a call from the Oakland A's. They told me I was going to make $350,000 and be the 35th pick in the MLB draft. I hung up because I thought it was a joke. I thought it was one of my friends pranking me. Then they called me back right after and convinced me it wasn't a joke. I later found out that the A's were looking for players that nobody else knew about. My draft, I think, was especially wild. I think the A's somehow managed to get 13 of their top 20 favorite players in the draft. It was crazy. What Billy Beane was doing, it was unheard of. Between 99 and 01, we had some pretty good teams, even though we were practically broke. In 01, we won 102 games. We were on top of the world. Felt like no one could stop us. The problem with being so successful is people start to notice. They realized our players were actually pretty good, and their value increased to where we couldn't afford them anymore. We lost Giambi and Stringhausen and Damon in the same offseason. Billy told me to figure out a way to replace all these guys. I was trying to think of a way to figure it out when I remembered something I learned back in my Harvard days about derivatives. Basically, people on Wall Street found out that small fractions of stocks and bonds pieced together would add up to a pretty big amount. I realized that we could probably do the same thing for baseball. Paul approached me and told me he had found out how to fix our problem. He told me that our win total was essentially a product of our runs scored relative to our outs. He said we didn't have to replace the exact production of our lost players, but rather we needed to find a way to maintain the same runs to out ratio. That way, we would keep the same ratio and therefore the same relative amount of win totals. He said we had to go for players that together would fill the holes that were left behind by guys like Giambi.
Just before the start of the 2002 season, the A's started to implement their plans. They brought in guys like David Justice and Scott Hatteberg, who were cheap and affordable. The A's looked for players with defects, players that were undervalued in the open market, because something was considered wrong with them. These players were cheap.
What Billy Beane was doing, it was crazy. He butchered my team and replaced it with what seemed like a bunch of misfits. These guys weren't even playing the right position. I remember when Scott was first starting to play first base, he was absolute horse crap. Credit to Billy though, because those guys ended up being one hell of a team.
Before those guys would be one hell of a team, they went through a lot of losing. The A's were third in their division at 46-36. Before the deadline, Billy Beane decided it was time for a change. He went through numerous calls to multiple GMs and traded multiple players. Following the trade, the A's turned it around. Within 6 weeks, they were atop their division with a record of 87-51, were on a 19-game win streak, one game away from setting the record.
That game was wild, just wild. We got up 11-0 early on, and I thought it was a wrap. We had guys in the bullpen just chilling, doing whatever. We thought this game was over. Our pitchers were killing it. I decided to let Chad Bradford head out to the mound. Then the other guys started scoring run after run. But we thought, we're still fine. We didn't think they could come back until all of a sudden, we were tied in the 9th inning.
On the Angels. Swung on, fly ball, deep right field, gets it again.
Scott Hatterberg, one of Billy Bean's pickups meant to replace the off-season, was relaxing in the dugout with a novelty bat. When he was called upon to go and hit, he hits a walk-off home run to win the game and set the world record for most consecutive wins.